In January 2026, the world was stunned by a dramatic turn of events that would reverberate across continents and reshape the global order. In the dead of night, U.S. Special Forces launched a meticulously planned operation, descending on Caracas with stealth and speed. Their target, Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela's embattled and controversial leader. Within minutes, they captured him in a lightning raid that left the city reeling. The operation was executed with surgical precision. Not a single shot was fired, yet the impact was seismic. As news spread, confusion and fear gripped the streets. Citizens watched in disbelief as soldiers patrolled, unsure of what would come next. The sudden removal of Venezuela's authoritarian leader left a power vacuum, plunging the nation into chaos and uncertainty. Maduro was swiftly flown out of the country under heavy guard, extradited to the United States in a high-stakes international spectacle. His departure ignited fierce debate around the world, with many questioning the legality and consequences of such a bold move. The Trump administration wasted no time in justifying the raid. Officials described it as a necessary law enforcement action, pointing to Maduro's long-standing indictments for drug trafficking, corruption, and human rights abuses. They argued that justice had finally caught up with him. This unprecedented action marked a radical departure from years of economic sanctions and diplomatic maneuvering. It signaled a new era of direct American intervention in Latin America, raising questions about sovereignty, international law, and the future of U.S. foreign policy. Around the globe, both allies and adversaries were alarmed. World leaders convened emergency meetings, while protests erupted outside U.S. embassies. Many feared that this operation set a dangerous precedent, risking wider conflict and destabilizing the region. As Maduro awaited trial in an American courtroom, Venezuela itself teetered on the edge. The government was decapitated, the parliament thrown into turmoil, and the nation's future hung in the balance. Would the opposition finally seize control and restore democracy? Or would the chaos spiral into a violent civil war? Armed militias and rival factions now vied for power in the streets, as ordinary citizens braced for what might come next. The capture of Maduro was just the beginning. It set the stage for a constitutional crisis in the United States and opened a new, uncertain chapter for Venezuela, a nation now standing at a crossroads, its fate undecided. With Maduro gone, Venezuela stood at a crossroads. The streets of Caracas buzzed with hope and uncertainty, as citizens wondered what the future would hold. The world watched closely, knowing that the next chapter would be written not just by Venezuelans, but by powerful interests abroad. The Trump administration wasted no time outlining its vision for Venezuela, one centered on oil. In press conferences and behind closed doors, American officials made it clear: Venezuela's energy wealth was too important to be left in chaos. Venezuela's vast reserves made it a strategic prize, and the U.S. aimed to revitalize the crippled oil industry with American companies at the helm. The promise was to bring investment, technology, and jobs, transforming Venezuela into a reliable partner in the global energy market. Trump promised prosperity for both nations, but critics saw a thinly veiled resource grab. Headlines questioned the true motives, and protesters filled the streets, warning of history repeating itself. Plans included installing a pro-U.S. government, privatizing industries, and opening Venezuela's markets to foreign investors. For some, this meant hope for economic recovery. For others, it was a threat to national sovereignty. Aligning Venezuela's policies with American interests became a top priority. Negotiations moved quickly, with new leaders eager to secure international support and legitimacy. The prospect of U.S. advisors overseeing key ministries, especially energy, fueled accusations of modern imperialism. Critics argued that Venezuela's independence was being traded for short-term stability and foreign investment. Talk of a long-term American presence, military and economic, sparked fears of another quagmire. Memories of past interventions haunted both Venezuelans and Americans, raising questions about the true cost of involvement. Parallels to past Middle East interventions were drawn, and Congress bristled at the idea of open-ended nation-building. Lawmakers demanded oversight, wary of repeating mistakes that had cost lives and treasure. The administration's ambitions galvanized opposition on Capitol Hill, setting up a fierce political battle. Debates raged over the limits of American power and the risks of entanglement in Venezuela's future. The question lingered in the air: was this truly liberation, or the dawn of a new era of American control? For Venezuela, the answer would shape its destiny for generations to come. Alarmed by the president's unilateral action in Caracas, Congress moved swiftly, determined to reassert its constitutional authority. The halls of the Capitol buzzed with urgency as lawmakers from both sides of the aisle gathered to discuss the implications of the raid. Many saw it as a dangerous precedent, one that could draw the nation into a prolonged conflict without the people's representatives having a say. Lawmakers from both parties viewed the Caracas raid as executive overreach and a risky step toward deeper military entanglement. The memory of past conflicts weighed heavily on their minds, fueling a rare sense of unity. They knew that unchecked presidential power in matters of war could have far-reaching consequences, not just for Venezuela, but for the future of American democracy. Senators Tim Kaine and Rand Paul, often on opposite sides of the political spectrum, joined forces to lead a bipartisan push. They invoked the War Powers Resolution, a law passed in 1973 to prevent exactly this kind of unilateral military action. Their goal, to limit President Trump's authority in Venezuela and restore Congress's role in decisions of war and peace. On January 8, 2026, the Senate advanced a resolution that would require explicit congressional approval for any further military action in Venezuela. The move was a direct challenge to the executive branch, signaling that Congress was ready to reclaim its constitutional powers. The debate on the Senate floor was intense. It wasn't about whether Maduro should remain in power, but about a fundamental question: who has the authority to send American troops into harm's way? Lawmakers argued passionately about the balance of power between the branches of government. The resolution mandated that U.S. forces withdraw from hostilities in Venezuela within 30 days unless Congress specifically authorized their continued presence. This was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a legal requirement designed to force a national conversation about America's role in foreign conflicts. The procedural vote passed 52 to 47, a narrow but significant margin. It was a clear rebuke to the White House, and a rare show of bipartisan concern over the unchecked use of military force. The outcome sent shockwaves through Washington. This set the stage for a high-stakes debate over war powers and the Constitution itself. The eyes of the nation and the world were now on Congress, as lawmakers grappled with questions that would define the limits of presidential power for years to come. The Senate's message was unmistakable: the power to wage war belongs to Congress, not the president alone. The showdown between the legislative and executive branches was on, and the stakes could not have been higher. The Senate debate cut to the heart of American government: who controls the power to make war? Supporters of the resolution argued the president can't start wars unilaterally. Congress must decide. Invading Caracas and removing Maduro, they said, was the very definition of war. Senator Rand Paul declared, "Bombing another nation's capital and removing their leader is an act of war, plain and simple." The administration countered that the raid was a law enforcement action, not war, and fell within the president's executive powers. They warned that restricting the president would weaken America's ability to respond to threats. The debate exposed a deep divide: strict constitutionalists versus those favoring broad executive authority. President Trump called the War Powers Act unconstitutional, insisting modern threats require swift action. The real issue: who decides when America fights, Congress or the commander-in-chief? For Senate Democrats, the War Powers vote was a stand against what they saw as Trump's reckless foreign policy. United in support, they argued the president had violated the separation of powers and bypassed Congress's constitutional role. Senator Tim Kaine framed the vote as a defense of democracy and a check on the imperial presidency. Democrats warned the raid risked another endless war, drawing parallels to Iraq, and called for diplomacy over intervention. Their message: Congress must reclaim its authority and prevent unilateral wars. The real surprise was 5 Republican senators breaking ranks to support the resolution. Rand Paul, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Todd Young, and Josh Hawley became pivotal, turning a partisan fight into a bipartisan stand. Their defection signaled that concerns about unchecked presidential power crossed party lines. Trump lashed out, threatening political retribution, but the senators stood firm. Their motivations varied: libertarian skepticism, moderate caution, nationalist wariness. But all agreed: Congress must not abdicate its war powers. Their votes marked a rare moment of principle over party loyalty. A new faction within the GOP had emerged, willing to challenge the executive branch. The 5 Republicans made their reasons clear. Rand Paul saw the raid as a constitutional violation and a step toward unchecked executive power. Susan Collins supported capturing Maduro, but opposed escalation without congressional approval. Josh Hawley insisted any deployment of ground troops required a congressional vote, reflecting a new conservative skepticism of foreign entanglements. Lisa Murkowski, known for her independence, warned against executive overreach. Todd Young, a former Marine, stressed the gravity of sending troops into combat. Their statements revealed a principled, bipartisan concern for constitutional checks and the dangers of open-ended conflict. This was not about partisan animosity, but about Congress's rightful role in war and peace. Despite the Senate's dramatic vote, the War Powers Resolution faced long odds. The Republican-controlled House was unlikely to bring it to a vote, and even if it passed, Trump would veto it. Lacking the numbers to override, supporters knew it wouldn't become law. But the vote's real power was symbolic, a public rebuke of unilateral war-making. It put the president on notice. Further escalation would meet fierce resistance in Congress. The vote forced a national debate on war powers and signaled to the world that America was divided on intervention. Allies and adversaries alike saw that the president did not have a blank check. The resolution's defeat wouldn't end the debate. It would only intensify it. The Senate's war powers vote was a turning point in the struggle over presidential authority. By passing the resolution with bipartisan support, Congress sent a clear message: the path to war must go through the legislature. The 5 Republican defections transformed the vote into a principled stand, not just partisan opposition. Though unlikely to become law, the resolution stands as a formal record of congressional resistance to unilateral military action. It complicates the president's plans, signaling that future interventions will face political obstacles at home. The debate over America's role in the world is far from over, but Congress has reclaimed its voice. The fight for war powers will continue, shaping U.S. foreign policy for years to come.